Welcome to George Mason University's Studio A. My name is Rick Davis, and our guest today has been described by LA Magazine as one of Southern California's super lawyers. He's represented clients in the film industry, giants like Rita Hayworth and Martin Scorsese. Please give a warm welcome to Eric Weissmann. Thank you so much for being with us today on Studio A.
Thank you for inviting me.
You, entering the legal profession, you must have had a range of specialties to choose from. What led you to choose a career in entertainment law?
Well, I didn't have a range of specialties. I wanted a job. And I was Jewish, so I couldn't work for insurance. I'm still Jewish. Now I could work for insurance. And so you wanted to be a defense attorney in the morning, a prosecuting attorney in the afternoon. And then somebody gave me a lead to work in a talent agency, and they had lots of antiques, beautiful rugs, and I said, that's for me. And in fact, one of the offices had a harpsichord in the office. And I said, my God, that's a harpsichord. And he said, don't they have them in all the offices? Anyway, it was very luxurious. And
so you were sold by the office furniture?
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. Was entertainment law your first entry into the profession? Into the legal profession?
No, I had when I was in the Army, I did defense work when I was drafted, and then for about 6 months I worked at a private practice, extremely unsuccessfully.
But since then it's been entertainment.
Better,
yeah.
Because now I'm here.
That's great. Can you tell us what exactly an entertainment lawyer does?
Well, the simplest thing is to look at contracts, either to draft them or negotiate them and make comments. And then it goes on to hand-holding, psychoanalysis, calling emergency hospitals, bailing people out of jail. That was when I was younger. My clients were younger.
Right. What? In light of that response, this next question might seem pointless, but what's the most difficult part? What are some of the unique challenges of being an entertainment lawyer?
I think the most difficult part really is to make it through the day, because you have a lot of competing calls, and you have to decide which ones are really urgent and which ones are not. And if somebody is in heat, you can say, take a number, I'll call you back a week from Thursday. So you have to field these various things. The other thing is you have to be empathic. You have to be sympathetic to them. At MCA, one of the first contracts I handled, I had to negotiate who would pay for Rita Hayworth's underwear in a movie in which it was not seen. And I said, is that why I went to law school for? And I said, well, actually, yes, because at the end of it, you don't do any good, but you don't do any harm. Nobody dies. So it's kind of easy, except that there are a lot of pressures. The people's moment in the sun is not that long. So you have to be responsive to their needs.
It sounds from that anecdote that there's a lot of what we might call care and feeding of the artist implicit in your role?
There is some care and feeding. I think that one of the attributes that are necessary, you have to have nerves of steel. And you have to be able to deal with a person who may at the time be under intense pressure, whether it be that they're doing a movie in the Czech Republic while the Russians have invaded Czechoslovakia, to being enormously over budget, and the studio wanting to fire you. And I've had all of those experiences.
Yeah. Can you talk about the Czech Republic example for a moment?
Sure. There was a movie called Bridge at Remagen, which dealt with a World War II incident in which there was a famous bridge that was subject of a big battle. And we had soldiers, actors in American uniforms, American tanks, actors in German uniforms, German tanks. And the Russians, with a very poor sense of timing, invaded with real soldiers and real tanks. So we had to get the heck out of there.
Wow.
So, and these contracts have clauses, force majeure clauses, which when something bad happens, what you deal with. And so we had to review overnight all the actors and all the directors' contracts, all the contracts, to see to what extent we could get out, to what extent we could suspend production. As I recall, the movie ultimately was finished in Finland.
Oh, wow. That's instant, on-the-spot response to a crisis as part of your...
Yes, and then the Russians left the Czech Republic.
Yes. And happy ending.
Yes.
What's the most gratifying aspect of this line of work for you?
I'm going to give you a flip answer. It's making it through the day and going home. And there are two ways to handle it. One is to take it home with you. I don't think you can survive if you do that. The other thing is to go home and do something else.
Yeah.
That does not mean that you're callous or disregarding their needs, but you have to replenish their energies. And if you spend all night awake, you're not going to be good the next day.
Mm-hmm. Is your cell phone always on? Is it one of those situations where...
No, it is not always on, unless I anticipate something, or unless I'm playing hooky and I'm at the horse races and I want to be available and people don't know. And then you have to be careful to take the call while a race is not in progress so they don't see it.
Could you talk a minute about the difference between, or your vision of the difference between what an entertainment lawyer does and what an agent does? Because I think the agent is a term that's probably more familiar to many of us.
Well, there's a joke that you know what's brown and black and looks good on an agent, a Doberman. I think agents are supposed to get employment, give career advice, and make the deal. Because agents have been failing in their job, there's the rise of the personal manager who gives more personal attention. A lawyer can certainly negotiate. Agents are the only ones who are qualified, at least in California, to obtain employment. But there are some clients, I've had some clients who don't have agents, they just had me. But these were clients who were very hot, and so they didn't need anybody to sell them. They just needed somebody to make the deal. And they felt they didn't need career advice.
And do they, as it turns out?
I think that one of the great pitfalls is to give career advice. I don't think you can tell a director what to direct or what not to direct. And I don't think you can tell an actor what he should act in and what he can't. I mean, you've done that yourself, so I don't think you'd like anybody to tell you.
Indeed not. Although I think some agents have a reputation for shaping, or at least perhaps they represent themselves as shaping careers.
Yes, but that's not what I do. And I think one of the advantages of being a lawyer, you last longer, the relationship lasts longer, because if a client doesn't get a job, he doesn't fire the lawyer, he fires the agent. And I have preserved my relationship by not giving advice on what pictures to take and how to perform a role.
Very wise. Let's turn to our students and see if they have any questions. Yes?
Hi, my name is Kent. Who have been some of your favorite actors to work with?
Well, I'm sorry none of you mentioned them. Gene Wilder. I represent Keith Carradine, who's a very good actor, David Carradine, who did Kung Fu. I don't represent too many actors. I did represent Rita Hayworth, Elizabeth Taylor, and Ava Gardner, all unfortunately after their prime. In fact, Rita Hayworth, many years after the incident of negotiating for her underwear, one of her husbands, she had a number of them, was still very friendly with her and asked me to become a lawyer. And she was strangely enough shy. And she invited my wife, May Louise, who's sitting here, and me, to her house, and she cooked the dinner for us. It wasn't very good. And then, unfortunately, she became ill, and I think the reason she was shy is there was the beginning of her, she had Alzheimer's, and she passed away. But some of my favorite, I do more work for directors than actors. I am very friendly with Gene Wilder, and there was a director, Robert Aldrich, who did The Dirty Dozen, and he directed Gene Wilder in The Frisco Kid. And once Aldrich says, I know you love Gene Wilder, but remember, he's an actor, and they're different people.
Another question. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Eric, and I was wondering...
That's a good name. How do you spell it? With a C?
With a C, yes.
Good.
Yeah, that's the best way to spell it.
I agree.
I was wondering, who were some of your early mentors in law, and what advice did they give you?
I was very lucky. My first two bosses were just wonderful, because I had kind of a frail personality, and I don't think I would have appreciated being yelled at. My first boss at the talent agency, he took me to San Francisco to meet the labor commissioner, and he said, you want to take the labor commissioner to lunch when you don't need him. You want to build up a relationship not when you ask for something. So you bank some brownie points. My second boss, who was the head of my law firm, he was a brilliant man. He was very calm. He was cool under all kinds of pressure. And he was also very nice. In fact, he lived quite late, and when he was sort of in a wonderful sense of humor. When he was in the hospital, close to dying, his wife said, Lee, do you know who I am? And he said, of course, you're Marilyn Monroe. So those were my two mentors. But there's other people who have influenced me. We had a senior partner who was very elegant, very suave, and good-looking man, very calm. And whenever I was confronted with a problem, I would say to myself, how would Monty Livingston handle this? And one day, I said to myself, to hell with Monty Livingston. This is the way I'm going to handle it, because the poor man never knew that he was the subject of this.
And that's when you knew you were fully fledged.
I felt that way.
Do we have another question from the audience? Yes.
Hi, my name is Kirsten. Do you think that having an agent to represent you is critical for success in Hollywood?
Having what?
An agent.
Oh, I think that, yeah, that's a good question. I think that particularly when you're starting, you need somebody to sell you. The problem is that agents are kind of hard to get. It's hard to get somebody who builds careers. They're busy and they don't want to take the time. And that's one of the other reasons for the growth of the personal manager. You get somebody who tries to get you an agent. When you're more established, when you're so lucky that you don't need to be sold, like when Gene Wilder was the number one actor in the world for about 3 years in a row, you didn't need to sell him. So he felt they didn't need an agent. And I felt the same way.
You've mentioned some wonderful artists that you've worked with, both on the directing and the acting side. What is it about a client that makes you choose to represent them?
That's a very good question. I once was met in my office by a group of stuntmen. They wanted to do a television series. And stuntmen are a whole different breed of people. And one of them had a gleam in his eye, and I sort of liked him. And he became a director. He became my client. And his name is Hal Needham. He did Smokey and the Bandit 1 and 2. He became very successful. And somehow I just felt that we could relate to each other. Incidentally, once he was a very successful director, he came into my office with an arm in a sling. And I said, what happened? He says, well, for a friend of mine, I rolled a car and I had an accident. I said, you're a big director now. You don't have to do stunts. But sometimes you choose wrong. 2 clients I took on because I couldn't get out of it. One was a young director who was dating the daughter of a client of mine, and I had to go on a Sunday to meet him, which I hated. And it was Martin Scorsese, who was just starting. And the other one, when I left Warner Brothers, I wanted to build my career, my stable of clients. And I had dinner with Mel Brooks, whom I had dinner with occasionally. He always brought somebody, and he brought Gene Wilder. And then I went back to the law firm. In between, I had a 1-week vacation, and Gene's business manager called me and said, Gene thought a lot about what you had to say to him, and he decided to become your client. The entire evening, I never looked at Gene, never talked to him. I was just interested in Mel Brooks. And then Gene, who had been an actor for a long time, reasonably successful, but Not then after Young Frankenstein and Blazing Saddles and Silver Streak and so on became huge. And sometimes I guessed wrong. You can't always be right.
You've represented writers as well.
I do. I have represented writers.
Is there a different strategy or a different feeling in terms of working with an actor versus a director versus a writer?
Well, you know, the film business is rife with conflict. The actor hates the director because he cut him out of the picture. The director hates the actor because he can't act. The studio hates the director because he promised him Heaven Can Wait and he got Heaven's Gate. The studio hates the theater because they're more interested in selling popcorn than movies. The writer hates absolutely everybody because they all change his work. In fact, many directors used to be writers, and then they decided to become directors.
Then they become rewriters.
To become rewriters. But I don't draw a great deal of this. I think that everyone who's successful in our business is intelligent. I don't think you can be successful and be a dumb blonde, as they say. And writers are obviously very intelligent people. And one of the nice things about what I do, it's much more fun to have dinner with a Mel Brooks than with a real estate developer, particularly nowadays.
Yeah. Well, actually, that leads me to another question. You're referring obliquely to the economic downturn that we're all experiencing. Has the recession affected the film industry itself?
Well, it has affected my office. We used to serve breakfast every Friday. Now they cut it to one Friday a month. Oh. But I think somebody's making up. I think that there are less independent films. There used to be a glut of them. There's less financing for films. And I've had 2 deals fall apart recently because the financing has fallen through. However, the motion picture business did well last year. So that's been one of the problems in the union negotiation, because the studios on the one hand claimed poverty, on the other hand they grossed a lot of money, but pictures are costing more money to do and to release, so the studios are tightening on that. Less, the $20 million salaries are pretty much gone, except for Will Smith and people like that.
Yeah. Are you finding that you have to negotiate more complicated deals to make the finances work out, or is it more of a risk?
There are more. You see movies, particularly independent movies, where you see credits for maybe 7 or 8 companies that have gotten together to finance the movie. And that's very complicated. You negotiate with a company in France and in Germany and in Italy and in the United States, and they don't speak the same language, and they don't trust each other, they don't understand each other, so it's tougher. In the old days, you know, you made a deal with a studio, that was it. Now you have pictures where 2 studios get together to co-finance a movie.
Was the studio system with the sort of the repertory company of actors and directors working with actors frequently, was that a different kind of a culture?
Yes, it was. In the old days, studios had actors as part of their group, and they taught them how to fence and ride and even act. And then when television came on after the war, the studios stopped doing that. And so actors became independent and started getting a lot more money. I think Clark Gable only got $5,000 a week. That's a lot of money, but it's not like $20 million, etc. Like
even with inflation.
Even with inflation, yes.
Sort of pursuing that same line of thinking for a moment, you yourself have worked in a studio environment and in an agency environment and in a law firm environment. How do you contrast those, what I would think of as 3 very different worlds?
Well, it's helped me because I see both sides of it, and even now my firm represents 3 studios and I represent individuals. The studio environment is, you have to make a decision. I'm not part of that. What kind of movies do we do? And they do about 20 movies a year, and it's very risky. At Warner Brothers, the chairman invited us to his home. What kind of movies should we do? And somebody said, I just read a script, it's what you want, it's in the water for an element, and some people die, it's very exciting. It's called Jaws. And then the chairman said, how much would it cost to buy? And one of the heads of production said $350,000. He never let me ask for the asking price. And somebody said, fish, who gives a damn? That was the end of Jaws at Warner Brothers. So sometimes decisions are made very peculiarly. In an agency, you try to sell clients. And as a lawyer, you own both sides. You're a hired gun, as it were.
Do you have a preference for one or the other, or you've chosen now to be in a law firm?
Yes, I think the advantage of being a lawyer is your own boss. And when you're in a studio, you have one boss.
Yeah.
And this way, as a lawyer, if you lose a client, it's just one of several clients. And they're wrong anyway for firing you.
Very good. I think our students probably have a few more questions for us. Yes.
Hi, my name's Brent, and my question is, what can Washington, D.C. filmmakers do to break into the Hollywood scene?
I was afraid you'd ask a question like that.
Hire a good attorney.
I don't know how anyone breaks in. It's a question of luck. There are some movies. There was a movie, Touch of Class. I don't know if you remember it. It was turned down by every studio, and then a perfume company bought it and did it. It's a question of luck, knowing the right people, and having talent, and getting your work looked at. I think one big mistake beginning filmmakers make, they come in with a script that costs $200 million, and that's not going to be bought from a young or a new person. I don't know if I've given you an answer. I just don't know the answer.
Well, how important is it, do you think, to be on site, to pack up your belongings and just move out there and set up shop?
Well, with the internet and all kinds of ways of communication now, you can work away from Hollywood. And I've had clients who hate Hollywood and work away from it. But obviously, it's important to develop connections. However you can, by attending film festivals, going to schools. Years ago when I started, there were no film schools. Meeting guests, interning wherever you can, but I don't have an answer.
Let's see, we have another question. Yes.
Hi, my name is Daniel. What is the most critical piece of advice you can give to an aspiring filmmaker?
Well, from a legal point of view, the most important advice I can give is to get it in writing. Most of the problems come when two friends get together and they have an oral deal. Samuel Goldwyn, who made a lot of statements that were called Goldwynisms, said that an oral agreement is not worth the paper it's written on, which was kind of a funny thing to say. When something becomes successful, people don't remember the deal as well, or they change their mind. So even if it's just one paragraph or one sheet of paper, not done by a lawyer, but just saying, I'm the director, you're the writer, we own 50% each, but I make the director decisions, you make the writer decisions. And if a disagreement between us, arbitration or something like that, from a lawyer point of view, the most important thing is to put it in writing. Beyond that, I don't know what to tell you, because it depends on each circumstance. And then make the right decision, but that's a question of luck and a question of intuition. If somebody offers you a job and they have a reputation of being terrible, don't think that they're going to be better with you, because they're not.
The triumph of hope over experience is definition of marriage and perhaps success. You've talked a lot about, both in answering the student's question and in some of your other remarks, about advice and about the limits of advice and guidance and so on. Is there a point where you just stop giving advice to a client, whether it's a monetary decision or terms of a contract? Or
Remember that the clients are very intelligent. And they may, certainly creatively, they know more about their limitations and what they can feel comfortable in doing. So I think it's dangerous to give creative advice as a lawyer. I don't want to do that. But sometimes in terms of a deal, I had one client who was very headstrong, and he was doing reality. He was doing shows like Circus of the Stars, which was governed by union AFTRA. And he got into a huge fight with AFTRA. And I said, you cannot fight with AFTRA. That's your lifeblood. And we really had a fight. I was on vacation in Hawaii, and I remember really being angry at him. And he went his own way. AFTRA lost a huge lawsuit in San Diego. And as a result, they went his way, so he was right. So there's a time when you have to stop pushing. But by and large, I mean, a good client says, you know, I'm a director, I direct, you're the lawyer, you give legal advice, and he would follow your advice, but you better be right.
Yeah. Now, you've mentioned AFTRA, which is one of the two big unions that actors work with, Screen Actors Guild being the other one in film, and there are myriad other union relationships with writers, with directors, technicians, and so on. How would you describe your relationship with if it's possible to describe this diverse community as a community, with the union community?
Well, as a lawyer, you try to have a good relationship with the unions. The head of the Directors Guild has been to my house. The Writers Guild kind of changes from time to time.
Yeah.
And the Actors Guild, you wouldn't want anybody at your house that's in the guild. Because there is going, you may have to feed them more. But it's good to have good relationships with them and to get their advice. I have a situation now with a client who wrote a script, and he's worried about not being paid. And the Writers Guild has a rule that if you deliver a script and you're not paid within 2 days, then there's a 7-day grace period, and then they have to pay interest. And if they still don't pay, then the guild fights for you, so you don't have to go to court and hire a lawyer. But it's important. Expanding on my answer, I think that it's important to have good relations with everybody. And you know, there are two kinds of people. There are people who have a need to be loved and people who have a need to fight. I tell the story of Harry Cohn was the head of Columbia. He was not well liked. And the story is a man comes to his office and says, could I please see Mr. Harry Cohn? He said, he died. He just died today. Next day he says, could I please see Mr. Harry Cohn? He said, no, he died yesterday. In fact, the funeral is tomorrow. Third day he comes in, could I please see Mr. Harry Cohn? And the secretary says, I don't know what's wrong with you. He's dead. I told you yesterday, the day before. He's dead, don't you understand? He says, I just love to hear it.
That's great. Well, on that note, I want to thank you so much for being on Studio A today, Eric. Eric Weissmann, this has been Studio A. Thanks for watching.